Police abuse remains one of the most serious and divisive human rights violations in the United States today. The horrific images of Rodney King being beat by the LAPD and the execution of Oscar Grant by the BART police are some of the most blatant reminders of police brutality against innocent victims. The excessive use of force by police officers, including unjustified shootings, severe beatings, and fatal chokings, persist because overwhelming barriers to accountability make it possible for officers who commit human rights violations to escape due punishment and often to repeat their offenses. Police and public officials greet each new report of brutality with denials or explain that the act was just an aberration, while the administrative and criminal systems that should deter these abuses by holding officers accountable instead virtually grant them impunity. This special insider-exclusive investigation discovered that police brutality is persistent and rampant across America, and that systems to deal with abuse have failed, and that victims seeking redress face daunting obstacles at every point in the process, ranging from overt intimidation to the reluctance of local and federal prosecutors to take on brutality cases of officers who have committed these human rights violations. Despite claims to the contrary from city officials where abuses have become scandals in the media, efforts to make meaningful reforms have fallen short. The barriers to accountability are remarkably similar from city to city. Shortcomings in recruitment, training, and management are common to all. So is the fact that officers who repeatedly commit human rights violations tend to be a small minority who taint entire police departments but are protected routinely by the silence of their fellow officers and by flawed systems of reporting, oversight, and accountability. Today, the Justice in America TV series examines this epidemic. In this new exclusive network TV special, Justice in America, Alexander Rios' story, our news team sits down with well-known civil rights trial lawyer Rocky Ratliff at the Ratliff Law Offices, who represents the Rios family, and with some of Ohio's and America's most prominent legal and medical experts who, along with the Rios family, seek a court order to change the cause of death from excited delirium and the manner of death being accidental to positional asphyxia as a result from restraint of another, with the manner of death being homicide. Plus, they want all 5 correctional officers involved in Alexander's death held accountable and brought to justice, not just one. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Mansfield, Ohio. It is my great pleasure to introduce Rocky Ratliff to the show. Welcome to the show, Rocky.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's great here in Mansfield, Ohio, right?
It's beautiful weather, beautiful town, hard factory, working town.
Yeah, we are here today to talk a little bit about your law firm and also a George Floyd kind of case. You had a client, his name is Alex Rios, but before we start talking about him, tell our audience a little bit about what your law firm does.
Our law firm, it started in 1978 with my father. It was a one-man kind of law firm. Him and his sister started it. We started in Marion, Ohio. We have an office in Marion, Ohio, as well as Mansfield, Ohio. And we're a litigation firm. So we take anything that needs to be litigated in court. From this case was a civil rights case. We also do criminal work. We do domestic family law, estate practice, pretty much anything that needs to be litigated. Will be there, and sometimes we get referrals from other attorneys to actually do the trial work.
Right. Tell our audience a little bit about who Alex Rios was and about the case.
So the case, Alex Rios was a young individual of color, Puerto Rican descent. His dad was Puerto Rican. He was in his mid-20s. He had 2 small children, one on the way, with different moms. Alex had a domestic dispute at the time. the police were called. They realized Mr. Rios had a warrant, and they took him into custody at the time.
For a minor violation.
For a minor violation.
Right.
Mr. Rios at the time didn't know that he had a warrant, and they took him into custody. Obviously had to when the cops arrived on the scene.
Now, while he was in custody, this case escalated dramatically, right? Yeah. Tell our audience what happened.
So the Wakeman police take him into custody. They transport him to the county line. Mansfield officers pick up Mr. Rios at the county line, transport him to the jail. At some point in time, they say he's suicidal. They put him in a suicidal gown. They put him in a cell. Mr. Rios is asking, hey, I'm not supposed to be here. Why am I here?
He was irritated, aggravated.
Totally. Because he thought he should have been out already and didn't even understand why he's there. At some point, he is standing on a half wall by the urinal. That the wall is made for privacy. He's standing there asking them, hey, why am I here? And they make the decision to open the door they're going to put him in a restraint chair. So once they pop the door, Mr. Rios darts out between them, runs into a locked area that would be for staff. And I believe 5 members of that jail team were on top of him, one filming it at the time.
Now, we are going to show that video that was released publicly. And I want to warn our audience that it has graphic content. So let's do that right now.
What's his last name again?
Rios.
Rios, I need you to come down so we can...
You were supposed to let me know this morning.
All right.
Call the law.
All right. I'm not going to call anybody unless you come down from down here. Okay, this is the last time I'm going to ask you. I've asked you for like 5 minutes. I'm not going to do it anymore.
What do you mean?
Okay.
I'm not supposed to be in here.
We're going to put you in a restraint chair for your safety due to not listening and be on a divider, causing a risk to harm yourself. We don't have time to continue that all night.
There's no reason
Okay.
for it.
All right, this is the last time I'm asking, then we're going to go in. We're going to go ahead and put you in the chair.
Why can't you just open the door?
Right here, Jeff. All right, come on down.
You do that, CO,
No.
Handcuff.
Is that a yes or no?
I'm supposed to
Go ahead and turn around, put your hands behind your back, and cuff up for me. If not, we're going to come get you.
All right. You guys
No.
are wrong, man.
Okay, we're coming in to get you.
Ready?
Let's go.
Go.
Cuff your back. Hands behind his back here, please.
Come on, man. I'm not even fighting.
Use your taser.
I'm not fighting.
Tasing.
Tasing.
Fighting.
No, dude, take it off.
Taser.
No, taser, taser, taser.
I'm not even fighting him.
Ow! 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 Glasses, let me get my goddamn glasses off. Taser! Ow! 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 All right! Ow! Ow! Can someone
Try tasing.
Can you explain to me? Because you're a dumbass.
No, you're the dumbass.
I didn't say you were.
Fucking took out of the cell. Really? Yeah, he's looking.
Oh! Ah! Give me your hand behind your back.
Oh shit.
Somebody take it.
He's on some type of drug, I believe.
Keep playing.
You need to. We have anybody else available?
I got this hand. You got it?
Rios? His last name's Rios. Alexander Rios.
Oh, that's the one that they put the warrant on last night, wasn't it?
Yeah, he thinks he's supposed to be out of here, and he wouldn't get down off the wall.
Take me. Cut it off. Cut it off. Turn it off. I would like to help. Let go of the cuff. I'll fucking... Let go of the cuff.
Right up there on the wall.
Try to pull that thing out, it won't come out.
Get a pair of shackles.
And we got another handcuff.
Where's the other hand at?
I got it.
Where's that?
Behind Nino.
I only have one hand, guys. I can't hold it.
You want a pair of shackles?
Okay. Somebody
I
get
can't touch-
beside me. Nino, you're
Buck.
gonna have to get up. All right.
Grab some. Oh, he's got them.
Cooper, you ready?
We got shackles.
Ready?
All right.
Down.
Shackles.
Give me the other hand. Bring it towards me, guys. You got it?
Shackling down there.
This cuff.
Those are too big?
Give me 1 second.
Where's the right side?
Is this gonna be too big? Let's slide this foot out there.
What we got?
Try it.
That might be able to cinch up around his ankle. Do his ankles now, so. Keep going. Hey, Gardner? Yeah. Come on the other side of Long. Yeah. When we come up, we're going straight up into the chair. All right. Cooper, I'm behind you. Me and Long are behind you guys.
I got you.
All right, I got the chair so it doesn't move. Okay. You two ready?
Rolling. He's turning. Straight up. Turning. Hear me?
Get up.
He's turning blue.
Get up.
Call the squad. Master Control, call the squad.
We need,
Turn him on the side. Turn him on the side.
just laying down on the side. Leave him on the side. Try to get some action, make sure everything's going okay for him.
In the video, that video is very disturbing because in the video, I believe as his attorney and the family's attorney since 2019 when the incident happened, I've only been able to watch that video a few times, 3 or 4 times, because once that video starts, you can hear a person with erratic breathing. You can hear him breathe, and you can hear his actual last breath being taken out of him with those officers.
Right. The only difference between that video and the one with George Floyd said, "I can't breathe." He was unable to say that, right?
That is correct. And you can hear his trouble breathing with 6 correctional officers around him. No one even looked to see if he was breathing, and you can hear it. Your viewers can hear his desperate breathing. He's not saying "I can't breathe" like Mr. Floyd. And the difference is Mr. Floyd had one officer at least around his neck area. As you saw in the video, there's at least 5 with one filming it. It's an officer actually filming it, and she keeps saying tase him, tase him. So they tase him several rounds. Mr. Floyd died a slower death than Mr. Rios. Mr. Rios' death probably happened in around 2 minutes.
Now, you come from an unusual background, and I want to bring this up because you're just not an attorney. You also came from, I think you told me you were a juvenile probation officer, correct?
I was a juvenile corrections and rehabilitation officer, and then after that career, I started in the adult probation field before I became an attorney.
Right, and you did that for almost 10 years, correct?
Yeah, just over 10 years. I also have a master's in criminal justice administration.
Now, when you watch this video, because you've been trained to deal with people who need to be subdued,
That's correct.
what do you see that these custody officers did wrong?
Number one, as a former supervisor in that field, I would have never opened the door, because once you open the door, you know several things can happen. Either I'm probably going to have to put my hands on this gentleman, or my staff is going to have to, which could hurt me, could hurt him, and it's going to lead to an altercation. With that kind of behavior, he is alone in his room. There's nothing that he can potentially hurt himself on in there. He's already in some gown. They've taken his clothes, but they're telling him, hey, we're going to cuff you and put you in this restraint chair. A restraint chair meaning everybody knows that's been in jail that means you're not going to be able to move. So we're going to physically cuff you to this chair and basically restrain you around the chest, around your arms, to the chair. So at that point, I would have never popped that door because just the way he's acting, he's fine. There's nothing. He's not jumping off like trying to hurt himself. So there's no reason to go into that room.
Now, there has been some internal investigations as to the conduct of these officers. What is the reason that they give, since they supposedly have the same training too, what is the reason that they give that they found it necessary to go into that jail cell?
They kept saying he's going to hurt himself is why they needed to, and he wasn't listening. So they needed to put him in the chair because he's not listening. But you have to remember, he's in a cell, a locked unit. He can't, by himself.
Can't hurt himself.
Yeah, he can't hurt himself. He's by himself in an approved cell to put people in. With no clothing, no sheets, there's nothing in there for him to hurt himself.
One of the main reasons we're here today is, as a result, when you look at the George Floyd case, those officers are in jail for a long time. When you look at this case, the Alex Rios case, there's one officer that has been charged, the other 4 haven't. I understand that the district attorney does not want to prosecute them, right? Why is that?
Because I think he has just as easy of case with all the officers, and maybe even the one that's filming it as well, so there'd be potentially 5 other officers you could prosecute, as he does with the one that's charged. I don't know why he separated them. There is a medical diagnosis cause of death which was labeled as from the Richland County coroner that we're currently working to overturn and change, which was excited delirium. So we think that's been a roadblock for him, but you would have to ask him, because I don't understand why one and not all, as your viewers have seen the video, they're all participating.
Now, we have here, and we're going to bring them on in a minute, we have a number of esteemed coroners from various counties around here who have given evidence, right?
That is correct.
Because evidence to show that the cause of death should be changed and these officers should be prosecuted, right? And what has happened as a result of that? Once you gather that information, what have you done with that? What motions before the court have you done?
The family has retained several experts that are leaders in their field in the state of Ohio. These experts have given their opinion that the basic excited delirium diagnosis or cause of death given by the Richland County prosecutor is wrong. There's a statute in the state of Ohio that allows you to go into court to try to change that cause of death, and that's what we're trying to do right now.
Yeah, and by changing the cause of death, what are the consequences of that?
Well, first of all, the cause of death from excited delirium to positional asphyxia will allow, first of all, everybody in the world to know Alex was died by the way they pressed him into that concrete floor and caused his death. That's number one. And number two, we're hoping that will open a pathway to have more officers prosecuted.
Yeah. Is it possible that the Attorney General of Ohio could step in?
We would love him to.
Yeah.
We've asked him to.
Have you attempted to do that already? And what has been the response?
That it's being prosecuted by the local kind of prosecutors. In the state of Ohio, for the Attorney General to step in, you would need the local prosecutor to ask for his assistance. At the point we are right now.
We have with us today the Alex's mother and stepfather, so we are going to bring them on right now. It is my great pleasure to introduce Tony and Don Mould. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here, both of you. Tony, tell our audience a little bit about your son, Alex.
Oh, Alex. He was always different. He was very athletic. He could do anything he wanted to do. He just, natural athlete, great person, kind, caring. He cared about everybody. He loved animals. I remember him when he was probably an early teenager, seeing a homeless guy on the side of the road and how he wanted to talk to him and see, find out what his story was. He was so concerned about people, and that never really changed. But he was a good kid. He was average student.
So he was great to have around the house, right? He had 2 small children too, and one on the way, right?
Right, and he had one on the way, and he didn't even get to meet his little girl, his daughter. But whenever he had the opportunity, they went to the racetrack together, the older one, because Anthony was still too young to do those things. But they watched sports together. Alex knew everything about all the baseball players, the football players. Every spring break during school, we would watch March Madness. So he just loved sports.
What are some of your best memories about Alex, Don?
He just was I remember playing football.
You loved watching him play football.
Yeah, he was a good football player, and he worked for me. He was part of our group. He cared
Decent human being, right?
all day.
He was.
After what happened when he was arrested, what were you told initially?
Well, I had missed the call in the morning, and it was just a voicemail. So I called back, and they gave me limited information, just that he was in the hospital, and I needed to go there. So I had no idea. Don took Anthony to school, and I threw on clothes, and I called my other son and told him the message I got and that I was going to the hospital. I had no clue what was going on, but I was heading that way, and that I would talk to him and my husband when I got to the hospital. And I just wasn't prepared for what I saw when I got there.
What did the doctors say?
Told us that at this point in time they really couldn't give us much of a prognosis.
But he was unconscious.
Comatose, on a ventilator.
He was on a ventilator. He was like, his whole body was shaking uncontrollably, and we didn't know how bad it was. Finally, some of the nurses would talk to us and say, they brought him in from the jail, and little by little, we found out things that happened and why he was at the hospital.
Nobody from the jail was talking to you at all?
No, not at all. They wouldn't.
When did you first start hearing what happened? Well, how did that come out?
The report in the newspaper was inmate injured or in suicide. It was a suicide attempt, or they made it sound like it was suicide. He was trying to commit suicide by jumping off a wall.
That wasn't your son?
No. Oh no.
Actually, he was arrested in the village we live in. Okay, that evening, and I went to the police chief and I said, "Hey, listen, was there something going on that when you guys took him to Mansfield, they transferred him halfway and picked him up out?" And he said, "Why?" He goes, "Well, they said he was suicidal." And he said, "No, he wasn't suicidal.
He wasn't.
No way in heck, And again, it just kept popping. Little things kept coming up that were just inconsistent with who he was.
So what prompted you to get a lawyer to start investigating?
It took us a while. Once we found out that Alex wasn't going to recover, we had to make that decision to take him off of life support. But we didn't know for days that it was that serious, that he wasn't ever going to be okay. Because we thought, okay, he'll go to a nursing home and he'll wake up. So we didn't even know for a couple days the seriousness.
When did you start suspecting that what the police were telling you wasn't true?
About 3 days into when he was in the hospital, I made a phone call and I said, "Hey, I'd like to pick up the hospital records for my son." I never called him my stepson. And I said, "I'd like to come down and get him tomorrow. Is that okay?" So I could look at things, because we had no idea what really happened. No one shared anything. They just said, "This is what happened, and here he is."
The nurses and the doctor had mentioned what had happened, and if they were us, they would get a lawyer. So it was mentioned from the staff at the hospital that things had happened.
But we didn't know what things were. We had no idea that they did what they did, and there was nobody said, "Well, there's a video, there's something you could see," which this all came on later.
Later, right.
How much later, by the way?
I would say it's been 9 6-9 months later.
So you basically went to an attorney to find out, hey, there's something happening that we don't know about. We'd like you to check into
And
this.
then I think, didn't Lou Whitmer request some things? She's the lady, the newspaper lady in
Mansfield.
Mansfield. I think that she made a request for some documentation to help, us put this together, because we did not have any idea. And after the video that she saw, then we were going like, wait a minute, this isn't right.
And nobody would talk to us. I mean, we didn't know. I think we found out that the prosecutor in a different county was getting the case,
Right.
but he wouldn't talk to us for, I think a long, long time. He said, I have the case in front of me. This really bothers me.
The prosecutor's saying this.
Yeah, to me. He says, but I can't tell you anything unless it goes to grand jury and we indict somebody. He says, that's all I can do for you. And that's how it's supposed to be, apparently. But to me, it's like, how can you not talk to people's families and let them know what's going on? And that's what they did.
You obviously made several attempts to contact the police, and they stonewalled you.
After I went to the records, there was no more communication. There was one guy in the sheriff's department that was very cordial, but all of a sudden that just shut down.
So after the real story came out, okay, have there been any apologies? No.
No.
Nope, nothing.
We are here today because one of the reasons is that there were 5 deputies, police officers, custody officers who were involved with this. One is being prosecuted, the other 4 aren't. What do you think about that?
I don't quite understand how that can work that way.
Especially if you see the video. I mean, even though they didn't kill him, they all contributed. They all acted like a pack.
As I was mentioning to Rocky, this is almost an exact carbon copy of what happened to George Floyd. The only difference is that that Alex didn't say, "I can't breathe."
Right.
Well, and he was in jail. Think about that scenario.
And where was he going?
He couldn't get out of there.
Well, my condolences to both of you. And we certainly hope that this opens some doors, that if the local prosecutor doesn't want to prosecute, maybe the Attorney General of Ohio, maybe the Department of Justice, as they have done in cases around the country. But it needs media attention. That's why we're here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Paul Mattis and Professor Phil Stinson. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Mattis, you are a retired coroner, correct? You've examined hundreds of dead bodies and issued death certificates. What do you find unusual about the Alexander Rios case?
Yes, what I find unusual is that I failed to see a basis for the diagnosis that was made for the manner and mode and cause of death. There is no basis for that. The manner that the local coroner here pronounced was that it was a accidental death, and that it was excited delirium.
Let's stop with that right. Is it possible that someone can die from excited delirium?
They do if, let's say, an elderly person who has heart disease rear ends someone and he's upset and he's sitting in the ditch, he could possibly precipitate a heart attack.
Right. Well, then his cause of death would probably be because he had a bad heart.
Yeah, right. It would be natural.
But in this case, he was a young man. He was in his early 20s, right?
Yes.
So have you had discussions with the local coroner? Are you guys in the same association? I think you're the past president of Ohio State Coroners Association. You know him, right?
Yeah, well, I know 87 coroners, but I'm not really familiar with the coroner of Richland County, Dr. Burwell. But getting back to your question, the whole thing was odd in that I can't find a basis for the diagnosis that he made. First of all, there's the diagnosis of excited delirium is not recognized by any authentic medical group. In the United States, even the World Health Organization, et cetera. And in fact, the largest group of forensic pathologists in the country recently, which they should have done years ago, have recently condemned that use of that term whatsoever in diagnosing a death.
So my question is, how can this death certificate stand?
It can't stand because there was, like I said, no basis. The autopsy was essentially irrelevant for the most part. And that's the only thing that I see that they did. What is important is the context of someone's death. Okay, what the events in and around the death is what's very important, especially in all cases, but especially in this case, because the autopsy was not really contributory. It could have been if he had broken a hyoid bone or some fractured ribs or something like that, that would have inhibited breathing. But basically, autopsy was irrelevant and not very useful. What was important is the context, and that came from the scene and the video of the scene and what took place, because that is the only thing that you can base a diagnosis on.
So, having been the past president of the Ohio State Coroners Association, many of those members, like any doctors association, are colleagues. Is it appropriate for you to reach out to this local coroner and say, hey, what gives here? How do you provide a rationale for something that has been condemned by the National Association? Wouldn't it be logical for you to do that?
Yes, it would be. I can't speak for the present Coroners Association. I'm speaking just for myself, but you are exactly right. Someone in the president and the board of the Coroners Association should have reached out in this case. But like so many organizations, they're afraid of stepping on someone's toes or getting on their turf or trying to tell physicians or coroners what to do. I think that's completely wrong, and someone should have intervened from the State Coroners Association. The only reason I haven't reached out to him is because I've served as an expert witness against his ruling and could end up as a witness in an eventual trial.
Professor Stinson, you teach criminal justice at Bowling Green State University, correct?
I do.
You are a lawyer by training, correct?
I am.
Because I want to ask you a question as a professor of criminal justice, right? What do you see the officers did wrong here? Because they're trained to do something else. What did they do wrong?
Well, they did everything wrong. They did everything wrong from the second that they opened the cell door. One thing that they did right before they opened the cell door was they started a video camera recording, because it was a planned use of force, and their policy was that they needed to record on video any planned use of force, so that if allegations were made against the corrections officers, typically their hope is that they could rebut those allegations and show that the corrections officers had acted appropriately. Now, in this case, it showed the opposite, that the officers had not acted appropriately. So from the very second that the cell door was opened, their training broke down. He should not have been able to get past the officers. He should not have been able to get out of his cell. And he certainly shouldn't have been able to run down the hallways through the booking area.
As both of you, as experts, what have you done other than being on camera here and in this show? What are you doing to advocate for the change in the death certificate and to make sure that these officers are prosecuted? What have you done?
Well, my job was to investigate the situation and to write a report.
And you did?
And I did.
The same for you?
Yes, I was interviewed by newspapers and was very vocal about what went on here, and voiced my opinion completely. And I may add that I don't even understand why they wanted to remove him from the cell. And the restraint, he wasn't that agitated. He was a little upset, as most people would be. But basically, it seemed like the restraint chair was supposed to be a form of punishment. They were going to pull him out and restrain him. And had they left him in the cell, he would have been just fine. He wasn't causing anybody any major issues. So I don't understand why the extraction had to take place.
Well, I want to thank both of you for being on the show, and let's hope that this show provides the incentive for the Attorney General of Ohio or the Department of Justice to do further investigation and accomplish what, should be done. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Mark Davis to the show, as well as Paul again. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Paul, one of the things we haven't covered yet is what do you, and I'll ask you that question afterwards, but what do you think the diagnosis should be here?
Well, obviously, the cause of death was encephalopathy, okay, which is lack of oxygen to the brain, which causes brain death. But this was an asphyxio death caused by positional asphyxia and with prone restraint and compressive forces. So prone means down on your belly, right, as opposed to supine on your back. And it was very clear that the victim in this case, Mr. Rios, was struggling to breathe. He wasn't struggling to fight the correction officers. He was just struggling because anyone would struggle to get their breath.
And I would suppose you agree with that, correct?
I do.
So I had asked him a question earlier, and I'll ask you the same question. You know, Paul is the past president of the Coroners Association of Ohio, and both of you have been practiced long time. Did you ever, or do you find that you should reach out, or someone should reach out to this coroner and say, hey, you got it wrong?
Absolutely. As a county coroner who signs a death certificate, you are putting your name on the dotted line, asserting that the manner and the cause of death are as indicated by the forensic pathologist who performed the autopsy. You've got a greater ability to take into consideration more evidence, in this case video evidence, of what actually happened versus the guy at the other end of the line who just does the physical autopsy, the anatomical autopsy, and renders an educated opinion.
Do we know whether this coroner did see that video in totality?
I don't think he did. I would have no knowledge of that, but as far as...
Because the video came out much later, didn't it?
Correct. Although it was available immediately, I do not believe that they saw that video. That is one of the most disturbing videos I've seen, and I've seen a lot of cases.
Yeah, and there have been, in any business or in any profession, once you get new evidence, right? Even in the legal business, you know, I mean, it's presented and cases change, the outcomes are changed, right?
That's exactly right.
What do you think should be done here? What do you think the death certificate should read? And what do you think should be done? And I know you're a doctor, but you would hold all of these custody officers responsible for the death, right?
I think there is still some justice left to be served. I think this is a very impassioned family that I've gotten to know. Even today, I've gotten to know this family better. Mm-hmm. They have no ill intent. They want justice for Alex. They want justice for the entire community.
What we have here is a cover-up, right?
Essentially, we do.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely.
Well, we certainly hope this show changes that, we bring awareness to millions of people, and we certainly hope that somebody acts on the behalf of the deceased.
Yes.
Right?
Are you aware they suppressed the release of that video? We only got a redacted video over a year after the event. But that didn't mean that the coroners down who did the autopsy couldn't have viewed that. They should have gotten it right away. I mean, I've done many times when I view the cameras on the front of a train as part of my investigation to determine cause and manner of death.
Throughout your distinguished careers, you probably maybe have been wrong sometimes about the cause of death, right? And how difficult is it to go back and say, yeah, I missed that?
Not difficult at all.
Yeah, you should do it. And most respected coroners will do that, correct? Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, absolutely. This should have been corrected years ago.
All right. Any other last comments that you have?
I really want to get to the point that we have asked repeatedly, directly through the family's attorneys and through the newspapers, did you view the video? We've asked the 2 or 3 coroners down in Montgomery County and the medical examiner, or the coroner here in Richland County, Dr. Burwell, and they all refused to answer, which tells me they probably did not view it. And no one could view that video without coming to the conclusion that thousands of people have come to. And like I said, it's a horrifying. I talk to people all the time, even hardened professionals, who can't stomach viewing that video. It's so disturbing that they cannot view it.
Well, I asked myself that same question when I watched the video several times, because I've seen hundreds of these in my career. And what I come to is the conclusion that I believe that that coroner has watched that video. And I believe he just doesn't want to change his opinion, because otherwise he would look wrong. You know, that's my opinion.
And see the life leaving that young man's body.
Oh.
See the color change in his skin.
And with respect to your comments about the local coroner here in Richland, he you know, just went along with what the Montgomery County coroners, he didn't want to buck them because he thought of them as a higher authority because they were forensic pathologists, and there were 2 or 3 of them. But they were all wrong, and it doesn't matter what your title is. If you're wrong, you're wrong. And it doesn't matter how much training you have. If you don't look at the evidence, you cannot make an informed or correct decision.
That's right.
Well, I want to thank both of you for being on the show.
Thank you.
Rocky, this is a good example of a case where police need to be held accountable, need to be held responsible, because otherwise they say, hey, I can get away with this too, right?
That's correct.
How can we see, not only in this state, but other states, how can we see or make sure that law enforcement is held accountable to treat incarcerated people and arrestees properly?
I think better laws. I think the state of California was one of the first states to, at least, and I don't know that it necessarily passed, trying to make excited delirium not a cause of death, that you couldn't do that. Secondly, I think the training needs to be better, meaning here in the state of Ohio, you have yearly training instead of monthly training, possibly, because these officers obviously did not act within their training. So in order to do that, we need better laws on training. We need better laws on totally getting rid of excited delirium, because excited delirium over the course of years have been used to cover up bad officer behavior and positioning.
What's the legal definition of excited delirium? It's your fault.
Excited delirium would be a diagnosis from the medical field saying, based on his, if you will, profuse sweating, his superhuman strength.
He caused his own death.
He caused his own death, yes.
Well, I want to thank you for being on the show, and we're going to see that if the Attorney General can maybe take this on.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.